Hello, ladies and gents. How are you guys doing today? It is a pretty choppy, messy market out there, huh? At least the last couple of hours. All right, it is the end of June already. So we've got the G20 underway right now, and that's probably what's going on partially with the market, with not getting a lot of activity here today. We're going to go head on over here to the charts, and I'm going to pull up, hold on one second here. I'm going to pull up our NASDAQ to begin with. I'm going to go look at the bigger time frame. My real tick's going to pop up here in a second on us. So here's what we've got going on this morning. So the day kicked off with a 2T. You can see that little 2T over here. It didn't quite have a full 100% measured move on that second wave. I actually ended up missing this at the open. Just too many distractions going on right away at that morning, but it went into a really nice two-wave move. So we had good exhaustion here on the downside. It even tried to go for a little 2B, didn't quite have a slightly lower low, but you can see that little momentum shift. And then we've had a two-wave move up. So here's where the point got to be, where things kind of started to really shift. So I shorted this, but I took my gains off here because when we're looking at the larger time frame has been a lot choppier and the market has just been a lot more hesitant. Usually in something like this, I would hold it. I would look for, or at least hold part of it. I'd look for a head and shoulders to get more downside. This action over here is what kind of made me a little bit more iffy about that. Because the best moves for more downside are going to hold that low. They're going to go give you the two waves, and then they're going to go and do the breakdown. They won't do the double low to start with, where you get a slightly lower low. The micro actually went to a slightly lower low, although we didn't have that here on the E-minis. And shift. So our channel has ended up breaking out to the upside, and it's been really tricky for a lot of traders to catch this. Even though we've had some smaller, more gradual moves in here, we had three waves up, 1, 2, 3, into the upper end of the channel. So this was, decent resistance. But the problem was for a head and shoulders, it pulled up too high. So the head and shoulders should have held right about here and then gone for the breakdown. So this was kind of the first little clue. This isn't quite right. I thought about trying to short there, but because of this momentum and going too far on that head and shoulders, I ended up passing on that. It would have basically scratched me out because of the way this has moved here, but we're basically getting almost like a cup with handle type of thing going on. Let me go up to a larger time frame. I'm going to start by going up to the 120 minute because I want to show you guys what's going on here on the bigger time frames. So last week we were looking at, well, actually going into this week, Monday, we were looking at this as a shallow avalanche, ended up breaking down, came into the support from over here, pretty measured impulse smooth support, and then it's gone into this triangle. The thing with triangles is what? What do triangles like to do? Whipsaw, flush, false break, right. They like to break one way, falsely, and then can turn around the other way. They also can break either way, yes. So this also had me more leery this morning. So I stayed in scalp mode all morning because of this. Sure, there's instances where this will just go and drop. More often than not, it would try to flush higher first and then drop, and we didn't really have much of a flush this morning. It did go up a little bit. I mean, technically, you can see if you drew a channel, connected the line straight. I'm not drawing straight, but you can see it did break that upper line a little bit, but it wasn't a flush. It wasn't enough to whip people out to allow it to break down. So what we were looking at yesterday in League of Traders was the potential that this could go up to a 2T here. It could do the whip to the upside, then come back down, go into a base, and then break lower. I think we've still got that potential. It's just not doing quite that midway action that we were looking at. So I do still think that we've got this room for this to try to break down, but I wouldn't be surprised if it pulls up a little bit more first. Unfortunately, the way this is pulling up, it is something it can actually bring in some momentum up to the upside before it tries to turn around, even on the larger 120-minute chart. So right now, we're going to be in a higher risk trading environment over the next couple of days. Like I said, we've got the G20 going on, so it's probably kind of holding off, waiting for this to happen. Oh my gosh, you guys, I just had a hawk practically dive bomb me. Okay, I guess he was interested in what's going on in the market. I'm sorry, I guess it was a peregrine falcon, not a hawk, but whatever. Anyways, all right. Well, startled as it whooshed in front of my face. Here we go. So let's go into some of the other time frames here. All right, so daily chart, we've obviously gone past this fan. Can remove that one. And we are not really at a great point pattern-wise here on the daily time frame. So originally, when this was coming off of the lows, we were looking for the potential that this could go up, do a measured move, do a 2T, basically a steep 2T, try to reverse. When it got to this point, I thought, you know what, maybe it's going to go and do a tilted 2T. So it'll have the 2A correction and then go up to do the 2T and reverse. It's kind of right smack at that absolute time development that it would need to do that, but the momentum picked up on the downside. So that opens it up that this could shift more. It could even pull down in here more. It just changes the probabilities. So if this had been more of a gradual correction into this level, that would have the best shot of doing more of the straight up move. You can see over here. So here you had the flat move. Here you had more of a price correction. So it had a little bit of a harder time the next time around, kind of getting going there. Ended up doing a flush before it whipsawed back up. So that's what we've got as more of a risk now, just because of how this daily is playing out. And so really going to watch the momentum on the intraday, but I'm not like really stuck with a huge bias on the larger time frames. I'm kind of like, I'm just going to play each move as it comes on the intraday charts, because there is the possibility that this, instead of trying to develop into that avalanche now, because it didn't hold what we wanted to see here with that flush up there, and then to bring it into the longer base, because it didn't flush to the upside there, it does open that up that this could go into a kind of a creeper move that could still pull up here. So despite the base at lows, especially in the S&P, the S&P was particularly trying to base at lows for an avalanche. Despite that, what we have is the potential that on that larger 240-minute and daily time frame could do a little bit of what the S&P is doing here intraday. So I know it's not as fun as, hey, hey, here's our main bias as we go into this next week, but it's just not quite shaping up right. And when we look at the 240-minute on the ES, notice what happened right here. And I think we talked about this in League of Traders at some point this week. But when we get a base for an avalanche on a bigger time frame, we don't want to see this lower low here in the middle. We want to see it kind of base out there and give us a nice breakdown. If it goes for this lower low, the best case scenario for the bears would be that it only goes out to, whoops, my pen got away from me, that it only goes out about the same amount of time and then kind of does like a tilted continuation. Well, it went past that. It didn't go at that point. So by going out longer, if this tries to break down here on the 240, it's not going to be as easy of a move because of that lower low in there. It's more likely that it can trap bears. So the only thing at this point, I think, that could really get the market dropping fast would be if there was something news related that would drive it, because otherwise the technicals here are for the most part looking like a creeper market to the upside with the smaller flushes to the downside, but overall still heading back up. And that is something that can gain momentum as it works its way higher, just like we saw with the market here, basically since about 10 o'clock, doing the same sort of thing where it starts out kind of slowly, looks like it's faking that it could break down, and then it shifts and ends up going higher. The same sort of thing here. That's the same thing that I think that we have a good shot of doing on the daily time frame as well. All right, let's go take a look at some of the other markets here. Pull up my trade station. Give it a second to load. Let's go. I'm gonna get some of the bonds and such open here too. Being a little slow to load here. So the stop should have been above here. And I should have looked at these previous little moves as an average for where that would hit that. Yes, so here on the euro dollar, you can see mistake that I made, and I got back into it, but that kind of hurt a little doing that. Took me a couple times. Then we had the lovely little two-wave move to the downside. And that gave us exhaustion again. So we're doing wave counting in League of Traders here this week. So when we're looking at the highs in here, this is kind of tricky. I used this zone here as 1. This zone here is 2. And this zone here is 3. So you'll notice that the timing, the distance between these highs, pretty similar. And the one over here where it did the flush, it's actually a little bit further out than I was expecting. So it went a little bit farther before it finally broke. Here, you're glad you can see when I make mistakes. I know that's not exactly what she said, but yep, I make mistakes too still, you guys. Sometimes I make those rookie mistakes. But that's, what a lot of traders do is they have their stop above that previous high, and you can't do that when you're dealing with a 2T or a momentum reversal. You really need to use that channel break. And I don't remember what my reasoning was. It might have been that it was after hours or something, and I knew I couldn't watch it as closely. So it might have been something that happened outside of regular market hours. So that's where I should have had it versus what I did. And so now it's kind of, don't really see anything at this point. I mean, let me scroll over here. You can see where the 15-minute went from the nice two-way pullback, had a little bit of a 2B here, kind of the retest. This looked a lot like what happened on the NASDAQ last night after going into the close after hours last night. Let me show you that so you can see that comparison. Not last night, the night before. The one that you guys were buying after hours the other day. No, it was last night. My gosh, you guys, I got to think of my times well. Here we go. Right at the end of the day yesterday. So this is a 400 tick. I need to go down to a smaller time frame though. 200. I'll show you. Right here. So it's basically like this move in here, popped up, came back. So you can see the pop, came back. So you've got your kind of momentum reversal to a pullback, pops up, often like a 1, 2, 3, comes back down, retest it, pops again. So similar action. It's not exactly the same, but pretty darn close. You'll see repetitions of these versions over and over again. So a lot of times it's basically does like a momentum reversal or shift, pops, comes back, retest, usually can do a lower low. So you've got to do like a wave count. Usually it's a 2-wave move back down. And in this case, it was the 2-wave and then it did another wedge here. So usually you'll count the 2-wave back down and then watch for the pivot again. That's what we had happening here. And popped it up after hours there. And this has popped this one up too. And so now we're back at a shifting zone. It's not really anything other than just the smaller time frame stuff going on. Let's go look at some of these other, there they are, other pairs. I still think we've got more downside on the dollar yen. So we are at a support zone, but with the way this has moved, I'm still thinking this can go do this. I know we talked about this last week too. I still think that can go and do another low. It's a little bit stronger of a pop this time around, but I still want something that's going to bring that back down again. I don't see it here intraday. Intraday, you can see we had a little 2B. Pulled that back up. We got our 3 legs up and then our widening megaphone. Not really any main pattern forming here on the intraday on this yet, this point. See our pound. This is what the Russell was trying to do a little bit ago. Today, except it did not fully turn around. Let's see here. So on a 400. So this was what I was watching to see if the Russell would try to manage the same thing here. So you can see there's similarities, but they had different outcomes. So the pull up, pull back, second pull up, pull back, and then the shift with a 2T, and then a little bit of a stronger move. There's that. Here's this pullback right here. And so I was watching for this to try to do a 2T type of move, and it didn't really form as pretty as the one over here. It tried, just did not go. So sometimes we'll get these similar patterns and completely different results here. And this had a lot to do with where the trend placement was on the larger time frames. So when we look at the Russell, can kind of see it there too, but notice here on the daily chart on the Russell, this has a lot of room that this can still try to push higher. So we've got the pullback into the 76.4% fan. Second test of that fan here. I would have preferred the test was more gradual, but second test there, and it's kind of gaining momentum off of that. So at this point, what I was looking at was this previous high here as resistance, but also measured move levels. So looking at the measured move here, which placed it right about there, and then measured moves on this too, which also puts it right about there. So there's still more for this to kind of wiggle and push higher. So a lot of times when you get different results on a trade, different outcomes, it's because of where things are happening in the larger trend. So they might look exactly the same or really similar on a smaller time frame, but the trend placement's totally different. So if you look at the pound, you've got the wedge formation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's coming off of that low, that's a buy. It came right into that upper wedge resistance. Whereas the Russell still had wiggle room to push to some higher resistance levels. The Swiss, we've got a good exhaustion move here. This can go and kind of flush a little bit to the lows again. But overall, pretty good shorter term exhaustion. The monthly is up in the air. It's a lot like what's going on in the overall market. I think this could kind of go either way. I haven't been too excited about the Swiss on a monthly time frame because we haven't had a pure setup here for a while. On the daily, we've got 3 waves down, each wave faster than the last. So 1, 2, 3, comparable correction time between each. So what happens usually here is that if it does hold this absolute pivot low, it will start off slowly and then can correct faster. But a lot of times it can also pull up, try to go for a fourth and shift momentum with like a 2B or something like that. So it's going to be a choppier here on the daily time frame over the next month or so. So some of our stocks that we've been following are ROST. So ROST on the monthly had that steep 2T, and this is one where it gained momentum. Each swing up gained more momentum. So we're at a pretty good exhaustion point on this on the monthly time frame for longer correction. And it's basically doing this by doing these widening, more volatile moves. If we go over here, look on the daily chart, what we were looking for on this was that this could still even have the potential to do a 1, 2, 3 up, except that the momentum shifted as it went up. So here's what we were kind of comparing it to over here, but the momentum shifted on that second leg. So on the intraday charts, it's not going back far enough. Let me go pull it up on my, see, where did I post it? Oh, that was Roku. Okay, well, it's kind of hard to see here, but the momentum shifted over here. We had a little bit of that retest two highs. We're actually on a wave 2 for the downside move, and this is kind of trying to widen up here too. This can still go back and retest that low. On the daily chart, I think that this is just going to try to do a slower move, back and forth choppiness here for a while. It might try to break down, but it'd probably take like a week or so again for it to do that. Roku is another one we've been watching. And this is one where we were looking for a lot more upside. I don't remember who it was. Was it Jay? Were you the one that was trading this? Roku? The breakout here. So we were looking at that to have, quite a bit of movement for more upside. Let me retracement lines. So now we were going into kind of the momentum reversal shift zone. And then it had a little baby smaller momentum reversal at the highs. So here on the intraday charts, we've got the 1, 2, 3, and then you've got the 1, 2, 3. And then here's that same two-wave correction. So this is kind of basing out here, little two-wave base. I think that this has potential to still keep pulling lower here on the daily charts. So this Roku can do 1, 2, 3 back on the downside. You'll have support. I was looking for, it could easily move into 80, but essentially you've got the previous high here. That's going to be support. And then you'll have measured move support. Assuming it does this with like a 1, 2, 3. If it shifts, it might do something like a tilted continuation, which could actually put things a little bit lower. So you've really got to watch that momentum on the smaller time frame right now. To do a 1, 2, 3, it would have to essentially go immediately from this point onward. So if it doesn't keep going right away, you're going to have to adjust targets on that, because it might go and base out and then try to do another move, or it could do something kind of shifting momentum. It's okay if it pauses about 50% on that way down, about halfway, just because that'll be like the kneecap type of zone. But you want it to get to that level pretty quickly. Let's see, what other ones were we looking at? IYT, I think. So you had that steep 2T again here with an extra little 2T on the end. A little momentum reversal. Here's your two-wave drop. And now things have gotten messy. So this can go into this and still do a second wave up. We would just need to gain momentum pretty quickly to do that. It's a little bit too low of a right shoulder for an easy head and shoulders, but basically right here is going to be kind of a do or die point. Apple. Apple, same thing, except it didn't do the continuation, yes, this week. So what we were looking on Apple was, can this base out and do that second wave up? And it went past the do or die point for that to happen. So I would actually sit on the side on Apple here for a little bit, see how this momentum shift tries to play out, since it didn't go at the spot it really needed to go in order to get that next wave up. Basically shouldn't have had this extra kind of flush here. It should have tried to go right here so that it would treat this as a two-wave correction. So by going out past that, we've increased risk on breakout trades at this point. It's easier to get flush moves at this point now. You want to watch momentum when you're looking at your charts. So like on the Russell, for example, on the upside, notice how strong this is on the minute charts. Excuse me, it doesn't look as strong on the tick charts, but the time frame chart is substantially stronger. Let's see here. Tesla, you can see also had like that same kind of do or die point, but look what happened here. So this had the first one that was a base sideways, and then the second one went pulled back more through price. That's what we were talking about on the overall market, because this increases, if this is just more through time, the odds are higher that it can do a stronger secondary move. If it's more through price, has a lot more options for what can happen and gets messier and it becomes a more difficult trading environment. Sometimes it can pull up, other times it might go to a head and shoulders, other times it just goes to a longer base, rounds off. It can do an inverse cup with handle at that point. So it just changes the probabilities on that. So if you buy it here, it's not as strong as if this was a two-way base here. That's a better buy than just the two-wave correction. Yeah, you can still make money, but you've got to be more aggressive with your trade management on it, because if it doesn't get going right away, you just want to look to take most of your gains off. All right, guys, I'm going to do a little bit review here on the oil and gold just for a second, because my recording paused during that when I was talking about oil, gold, and bonds. So I'll review that for those of you that came in a little bit late, but that's a bit about it here for today. So I just want to make sure that gets it put into our recording. And if you have anything else you want me to take a look at, post it now and I will do that as well. So here's what we were doing on bonds. Where'd my bond chart go? Here's my bond chart. So what we were looking at on bonds was the fact that this is at a lot of resistance on the larger time frames. Here's the weekly chart. Measured move resistance. So we were looking for reversal strategies on the shorter time frames. And originally we were looking for a 2T, but it just did not play out as expected. So you can still see that kind of shift on the daily chart, but when we drop down, we didn't get the 2T strategy, which would have looked like this. It still pivoted at the same zone that a 2T would have triggered, but because it did with this widening wedge after a shorter two-wave up, it didn't have as strong of a reversal. So now this has the potential that it can go for a third high and do more of a momentum reversal. Now on gold, what we're looking at is overall more bullish on gold because we've got the rounded lows here on the monthly time frame. It has room to do measurement pretty easily. Looking for this to kind of try to base here a little bit longer, maybe something more akin to the avalanche zone and the continuation zone, and then do another move up. So overall, still bullish, expecting a lot more chop over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot more difficult of a trading environment now. We did have some decent action on the smaller time frames with a steep 2T, but nothing in here. This is just too messy right now. And then oil. Of course, oil, we're right at that midway point. So oil still has the potential that this can go and do that extra move up because it is a bit more of a base still. Again, we were comparing this to what happened on the Russell over the last day or so, where we've gotten a number of those types of smaller moves. Here's a resistance on the Russell, but there's still more. Here's the intraday on oil, so you can see that extra move. Basically, when it gets up to right about here, that's going to be the next level. That's going to be a do or die point to test it. So it has a decent level to be able to move to there, but it can also go and push and do a mission move like that. So the potential is to bring it back up into here. All right, gang, that is it for today. So thank you all for joining me, and I will see you over in the forum for those of you in League of Traders. Bit of an announcement fast. I am going to be on vacation in August, so we will not have Forward Focus for a couple of weeks in August. Let me grab those dates for you quick. So August 3rd through 17th. We will not be doing Forward Focus on those days. I'll send out an email reminder as well. But I will be overseas at that time with lots of traveling. All right, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you back here next week.